So believe it or not, the prairie warbler is not a resident of the prairies, but is actually the resident of scrubby second growth forest and young stands of pines. That's the type of habitat that they prefer. They breed in shrubby habitats with open canopies, ranging from pine forests, scrub oak barrens, regenerating forest, and borders of forest and prairies. In recent times, though, Christmas tree farms and strip mine soil ridges have attracted the species as well. The Florida species, which is actually a subspecies, inhabits mangrove forests year-round. I do have to say that this is always the very first warbler species that I usually see during fall migration. This is the first one to show up. So I'm assuming maybe since I am in South Florida and I do live near mangroves, that maybe this warbler is showing up, finishing up, breeding season, whatever it's been doing, and it maybe comes a little bit more inland to hang out. And I'm sure there are some that are migrating through from other areas as well. But this is definitely the first one that I see showing up. I don't see them in the summertime, even though it says that they're here all the time, but I only see them during fall and spring. So as far as the whole name, Prairie Warbler, Alexander Wilson named the Prairie Warbler in 1810 from specimens collected in Kentucky in a habitat that was back then called a prairie. The habitat is now referred to as barrens. So I guess this is why they named it the Prairie Warbler, even though it doesn't live in the prairies. So that's an interesting fun fact. So when you want to ID this bird, adult males are bright yellow below with heavy black streaks on the flanks. A black eye line and a black semicircle under the eye mark the yellow face. Males often have a chestnut patch on the back and a dark spot on the side of the neck. Females and immatures are similar but paler, with a grayish head and a broken white eye ring. Sometimes that grayish color can look a little brownish and kind of a drab, buffy color. And then that chestnut patch, that's more during breeding season. We don't see that in fall migration down here. I have seen it in springtime, but not in fall. So keep that in mind depending where you are and when and where you're observing the prairie warbler. So I think more spring and summer they're going to have that chestnut patch, and then in fall, winter they're not going to have it. So just keep that in mind when you're IDing this bird. So as far as behavior, this is a very active warbler that will pick insects from leaves and branches, and they kind of do a similar thing like the palm warbler, where they habitually flick their tail with shallow bobs. So this is also a tail bobber. So you might get it confused with the palm warbler. They both have some yellow, stuff like that, but it's a little bit different. It does bob the tail, but not quite as vigorously and as continuously as the palm warbler. So habitat, we spoke about that. In Florida, you're going to find them in the mangroves and stuff like that. I find them in edges of tropical hardwood hammocks and stuff too. So just keep that in mind. But if you're up north in a different area, look for power line cuts, pine stands, regenerating woodlands, overgrown pastures, and second growth scrubby habitats. So some cool facts about the prairie warbler is that they breed in the Florida mangroves, like we said, and they're actually that separate subspecies from the more widespread migratory ones. The Florida prairie warblers are slightly larger and have larger white spots on their tails. So that's a pretty interesting fact about the subspecies of the prairie warbler. And like most warblers, prairie warblers sing two similar but distinct song types. The faster A song is directed at the females for courtship, and the B song is sung at territorial boundaries to deter other males. So the oldest record of a prairie warbler was a male just shy of 8 years old when he was recaptured and released at a banding operation in Connecticut. So that looks like that's the oldest recorded prairie warbler. Their song is pretty distinctive. I've heard it before, and I didn't know what it was. I was like, man, what is that bird? And then when I figured out that was a prairie warbler sound, I was like, oh wow, okay, it makes sense. So cool. So it actually has a really nice like, it's like a climbing melody. I don't know how to describe it like that, but okay, so for food, the prairie warbler eats small insects just like most other warblers, also spiders and snails, mollusks. I didn't know that. That's a new fact for me. I didn't realize that they ate snails. So that's a pretty cool fact. Occasionally, though, it does consume fruit and other plant matter. I definitely have seen it eating fruit before. I've seen them do that in the big fig trees that we have down here that all the warblers seem to love. I'm telling you, if you come to South Florida, look for the strangler figs that are fruiting. That's where you're going to find all the birds. So for migration, we did talk a little bit about that. It is a medium distance migrant from eastern North America, and it goes to the breeding grounds in the Caribbean and it winters there. They are fairly early migrants. You see, I told you, it's the first one that I see. So they're fairly early migrants that begin heading south in mid-August and north again in March. So that makes sense. I'm telling you, it's always like the first one that I see, mid-August and then north again in March. Oh wow, so they leave pretty early too. That would make sense too. Well, I don't see a lot of them during spring migration, more in fall. And of course the Florida subspecies is mostly non-migratory. So when they go up north to nest in the summertime, the male often returns to the territory he occupied the previous year. So if you live up north and you have a spot that you know you find prairie warblers at during breeding season, keep looking in that same area during the summer and you're bound to probably see this warbler again next year. I've noticed the same thing during migration. I find them in the same areas down here too when they come down for migration. So egg laying in the peaks of Tennessee in mid-May takes place, and then their clutch size is 3 to 5 eggs with an average of 4. Their incubation period is 10 to 15 days. The female will incubate the eggs and the male will feed her while she's on the nest. And for fledglings, both parents will feed the nestlings, which will fledge around 9 to 10 days old. And after fledging, the male and the female divide the young and care for them for about another month. So that's kind of nice if you think about it. Some birds just kind of push them out and they're like, figure it out. But these ones, the parents will stay with them for about another month. I've noticed cardinals do that too. Cardinal parents will kind of follow, and they'll follow the babies, and the babies will follow them for quite a while. Usually in August and September, I noticed that. Okay, so back to the prairie warbler. So the nest, the female will build the open cup nest of long plant fibers and milkweed down, and is lined with fine grasses, hair, and feathers. The nest is placed in a small tree or shrub about 6 to 7 feet off the ground. They usually do 1 to 2 broods a season, and the egg is a pale brownish or gray color, often with a ring of spots near one end and more spots scattered over the rest of the shell. And of course, the hatchlings are helpless with some gray down, like most other birds. So we did talk a little bit about the behavior of the prairie warbler with the tail bobbing, so let's talk a little bit more about some other behaviors. So the prairie warbler is an active species, picking invertebrate prey from branches and leaves, of course while bobbing the tail. Males on breeding grounds sing avidly from the highest treetops in their territory upon arriving in the spring. So they're looking for their mate, they're looking for their ladies that they want to impress with their beautiful songs. So the prairie warbler sings 2 songs, one directed at female courtship, we talked a little bit about that, another directed at males to establish their territory and their boundaries. They're like, step off, this is my turf, don't get nowhere near it, I've got my ladies here, I'm good to go, stay away from my area. So they're quite territorial. So when an unmated female moves toward a singing male, he will fly to her with slow, stiff wing beats. The female then initiates copulation by leaning over forward and slightly shaking the tail. So she's letting him know, hey, it's all good, we're ready to go. So prairie warbler pairs are socially monogamous, so it looks like they stay with one. Extra pair mating does occur when males leave their territories and approach neighboring mated females. The prairie warbler is mostly solitary in the breeding season, but does associate with mixed flocks in migration and through the winter. So it looks like they do travel together with other types of birds or maybe other types of warblers during migration. As far as conservation goes, prairie warblers are declining throughout most of their range, so this is not good. The North American Breeding Bird Survey estimates a loss of almost 2% per year between 1966 and 2015, resulting in cumulative decline of 63% during that time. Wow, that is quite a lot. Wow, that's a lot of decline. Partners in Flight estimates a global breeding population of 3.6 million individuals. They rate the species a 14 out of 20 on the Continental Concern score, placing it on the yellow watch list for species with declining populations. If the current rate of decline continues, the prairie warbler will lose another half of its population in 70 years. Wouldn't that be awful? I really like the prairie warbler. I don't want it to go away. Since colonial times, deforestation has created a great deal of habitat loss for the prairie warbler, but much of this is now being lost as towns expand and eastern forests regrow. So it looks like, as usual, habitat loss is a problem, especially for the prairie warbler. So what can we do to help the prairie warbler? We want to not cut down as many trees, and we want to create more forest environment. I always say, even though maybe you can't go and create a new forest or plant a forest, but you can plant bird-friendly trees in your garden, and you can plant a bird yard in your garden to make up for, a lot of the stuff that's being cut down, or maybe all the trees that were cut down to build your house. If you add trees back into your yard, you create habitat for warblers and birds and all kinds of wildlife. So that's what I did. That's what I try to do in my yard. It's coming along quite nicely since I moved in here. So I suggest you do the same for conservation if you care about birds. So that's it on the prairie warbler. I hope you found out a little bit more about this bird, how to ID it. You can see lots of pictures and videos here, how different the female and the male look. You can kind of tell the difference. Of course, the male has that brighter black and the female's more drab. Both are yellow, and then you've got the tail bobbing you want to look for. So alright everybody, have a great night, and I hope you get to see the prairie warbler this year for spring migration. Alright, bye.